I'm trying
Good
something
morning.
new. I just went like this instead
You
of
did.
saying we're live. I
Good
didn't warn
morning.
you. I just thought that was just on the spot. I didn't think of warning you before.
No, I knew what you meant.
Good
Here we
morning.
are, season 2, episode 4.
That's right.
And before we get to the question, I have been talking to my students. I found out that one of my students, he goes for a run and he listens to Teaching Tangents. It's the thing for him.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've
And
I've just finally updated all the audio episodes, so they're all up to date right now
very
on
cool.
Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts. So
Brilliant. So you
we
can
have
go...
to remind ourselves that there are some people listening, so they can't see our T-shirts and things like that. But overall, the vast majority of the conversation it works in audio, I think.
I think so too. And we can describe the T-shirts anyway. So I think it works.
I think it's not the most important part of the episode.
It's not. There's another one.
Tradition. It's a good tradition.
Another one of my students said he was really happy that we answered his question. And he felt that we might have misinterpreted a bit and made it a bit more negative than he meant it. But he was really chuffed about it. He was like, wow, you answered my question. That's great.
Cool. He was happy with the answer, aside from the fact that we were negative about it.
He was.
Or I was negative. Perhaps I tend to be the negative one. I think I'm.
Really? I get told I'm negative all the time. But I don't know, it depends on context maybe. But he was happy with the answer. It gave him a lot to think about.
Great. Perfect. So send us more questions. And I'll tell you what, if your students and the students or anybody watching this, if one day I promote it any more than I do, which is not much, I feel like a lazy bones. Anyway, this usual, I'm keep repetitive. Write a review, because then more people can find the podcast. Or write a comment on YouTube. Like the channel, subscribe. Do you put all the videos on your channel now, or are they on both channels?
I will be putting them all on my channel. And yeah, I'll be asking students to have a look. But then also leave a review on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts, right?
Yeah,
that will help. Yeah. Or can you leave a comment? If you leave a comment and it's not 5 stars, does that matter?
You can leave a review on whatever podcast, like on Apple Podcasts. I don't know about Spotify, to be honest. I don't know how it works. I need to look. You can leave, and then you can leave comments on the YouTube channel videos.
Yeah, comments on YouTube.
And you can subscribe on the channel of the YouTube. You can like the video. You can comment, and then if you're listening in audio podcast, you can give a 5-star review, for example, 5, for example, and leave a comment, which is the review. It goes along. It goes together. But usually, most of the apps are not very good for posting reviews, and it's all been clunky since Apple moved. And because I don't have an iPhone, I don't know how the Apple Podcasts app works, whether it makes it easier to post a review than before, because before it was very clunky on iTunes.
Yeah, the best people don't use iPhones.
Well, it's a whole big debate, that one.
Yeah, I like stoking the fire occasionally with my students.
Yeah.
So today's question, before we get, we need to do T-shirts. So this T-shirt.
So I was wondering if I'd worn it before, but apparently not. And I was like surprised that I haven't, but here's the T-shirt. Can you read? You must have seen it before. It's an old T-shirt.
I've seen you wear it, but I don't think you've worn it. Haikus are easy, but sometimes they don't make sense. Refrigerator.
There you go.
Completely up my street. I feel like I should buy it and wear it.
Yeah, I need more of those.
So today's T-shirt, I'm really proud of.
I also need more of those because I'm running out of T-shirts for this show. Ooh. So is this a music one or is this just a skull?
No, this is...
Because I don't get the reference. Sorry.
There's no reference. It's just a skull design.
Just a skull design. It's a nice skull design.
Yeah, it is. It's a small...
White line on black background for the people.
Yeah, and it's a sketched skull on a black background, white line. Small business based in Manchester. They're called Salt. SOOLT. I don't even know if that's how you pronounce it. And I meant to check what their website was before I came on so I could say what it was. But
you don't know what they do, is that what you mean? Or they make clothes?
They do make clothes, but I can't remember the name of their website. The hyperlink. But the really interesting part that you might be intrigued to know is that I bought this because I saw it advertised on my Instagram feed. So I like, oh, that's good. I clicked on it, and then I actually bought their Christmas jumper, which is the same skull design, but the skull wearing a Christmas hat. I thought I have to have that. And then
Did
inevitably,
they have the Instagram shopping feature that you bought directly off of Instagram?
no, it was an ad. I clicked it and it took me to their site, and then I bought it. And it was super easy to buy, and I'm so happy with the fit, the look, the service, everything. Like little handwritten note in there. Thanks for supporting our small business. Write a
So do
review.
you think it's so the targeting, you
Yes,
giving your data away is worth it for better ad targeting? Is that what you're saying?
absolutely. I regularly.
I don't think we realize how much we're giving away, but it's cool. I don't know.
I regularly click stuff through on Instagram. I can't help it
I don't
because
have that many interesting ads to be. But actually, I've stopped using Instagram. Not like
have you?
I didn't make a concerted effort to get off of it. I'm just not getting on. I'm just not really using it. I posted a photo yesterday, so I'm never using it. I'm much rarely I'm not really just looking much on Facebook or Instagram. I'm not as really, I said, I'm not never there, but I'm just not really spending a lot of time.
I do like Instagram. I feel like it is speaking to me. The ads that I get are speaking to me. That massively targeted to me, it's ridiculous. So I have bought things from Instagram. It works. It generates revenue. So today's question is, I think, quite an interesting one. And it is, here we go, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
How can I remember the things we learn at school, like lessons, in the long term?
How can I remember the lessons and the things I learned in school in the long term?
Yeah.
I like this one. It feels like something that we've discussed before, but not that much.
Yeah.
It's gonna, I think I don't know if this is a good place to start. The reason I'm reminiscing what we've talked about before is also to try to cover different grounds.
Yes.
I'm thinking out loud. I'm telling you and anybody else listening, I guess.
Looking at some
it
previous,
makes me think of like, how do I motivate myself? And there was another question similar to that.
Motivating myself was season 1, episode 6.
Do you have it?
There's
or do you like remember?
I've got the list right in front of me. We haven't really talked much about. There isn't a question specifically about learning and remembering. Should I do a master's? Like you said, how do I motivate myself?
So the quick answer is I don't know, and I think I forgot most of the things I've learned. But there's somewhere in there, I suppose.
I was going to be even more facetious and say a lot of the things you learn at school aren't worth remembering.
It's not wrong either. I think a lot of the things that you live through are not worth remembering, which is why your brain just sifts through and prioritizes other things. And it's not. And I believe, and if I think this is correct, that everything is still pretty much there. It's just like in long-term storage somewhere.
That's right.
It's difficult to access, but it's accessible, generally speaking.
Yeah, I've read that. It's come across that in a couple of books. The brain that changes itself, the body keeps the score. A couple of I do want to read that. Some of the psychology textbooks I've read, every experience we've ever had is encoded into our brains. And then when we have a near-death experience, when people say their life flashes in front of their eyes, that's what's happening. The brain is just firing.
Oh yeah, I remember reading about that.
So everything just goes, whoa, because we're looking for something that's going to help us with this extreme experience. It's there.
So, okay, I have to admit something. And I've said this kind of stuff before, so it's not going to be vastly surprising. I apologize if I'm repeating myself.
That's okay.
But I feel like I didn't do much this week or do much of reading new stuff. I did a little bit, and I have new experiences, but do they match the question? And I'm like, oh, I need to write my newsletter later. I haven't read anything really this week. It's not true. I read some stuff, but I didn't read all that much. And it's interesting because I feel like, and then I had a sudden thought that I'm not sure I added all the notes from the last week's episode. So anyway, I'm having all those things of like being a bit of a fraud, imposter syndrome. But of course, the irony being, however many articles I would have read this week, I don't think that they would have been specifically about this question anyway, which is part of the fun of this show anyway, and this conversation every week. The other easy answer to the question is to practice somehow and teach yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
this is going way back, but for example, I helped my nieces with their homework over Christmas vacations or Christmas holidays. And so my little niece was doing her so she's learning multiplication.
Multiplication.
Yes, sorry, I don't know why I didn't think that was a word all of a sudden. Her multiplication tables. So she's at the beginning of her multiplication tables and needed to, work them and learn them. And she had a poetry to learn, and the older niece had some English to work on, which was fascinating and bonkers, as in it was so weird. That was just a tangent a little bit, but so she's in her first year of middle school. So she's her first year really properly, studying English.
So she's like 12, 13?
Yeah, she's 11.
Yep. She's 11. Okay, a bit younger. Okay.
Turning 12 at the end of this year. Mm-hmm. So first year, so she started English in September, formally, right? I think she had a little bit of English classes when she was in primary school, but technically, foreign language you start at that point. And her English teacher's given her a Mr. and Mrs. book to read, and a whole set of crossword puzzles, like Christmas crossword puzzles. Except they were on very old paper, the kind of stuff that's been photocopied for 20 years. You can't read anything on it. And my niece had none of the vocabulary that was required to read the thing in the first place, let alone the fact that you couldn't read it because it was all blacked out.
Oh my God.
So I was like, but wait a minute. So you must have done some kind of class to learn these words. She was like, nope. So you're just given these crosswords. You just started English 3 months ago, and you have no knowledge whatsoever of any of the Christmas vocabulary. That she was like, no. Okay, how about this Mr. and Mrs.? She was like, oh, it's kind of cool that you got a Mr. and Mrs. book to read. But I was like, but wait a minute, you don't know any of the words, how to pronounce them, what they mean, and you've never read in English before. I was like, I think maybe this is kind of strange from a teaching methodology. And I had a hard time filling the crossword puzzle. We had to go from a logical and math standpoint because some of the pictures were not visible properly. So I was like, all right, so I think we can work it out from the pictures. I think because they were not, and the number of letters available in each one of the boxes and the English words.
That's hard. That's hard, even at the best of times.
Impossible to do on her own. Impossible.
Wow.
Absolutely. So, but it made me practice first level, not even, this was more than first level English for somebody that was just learning, my multiplication tables, which I knew, but I was like, oh yeah, I know that. I can teach you. We can work it together. The poetry that I didn't know, but there was not, getting somebody to repeat that wasn't very particularly difficult. And then if I think about it, there's of course a lot that you'll forget, but whatever you're interested in. So there's one thing that we've said before, and I think it's worth repeating, that there's a large part you only realize much later that the purpose of doing studies in school, or at least I think we believe, is to train and expand the capacity of your brain to think and to carry new concepts, and that you have a general base knowledge of stuff that is useful for you to think about new things, because the more you have elements, the more you're able to bring them together and make new connections in your brain. And I think it's useful for later just to have a vast amount of knowledge. And it's interesting, I've also been learning that there's less and less of that in school in France. And I don't know if there's that in the UK. For example, I just learned that history is now optional in high school. There's a trunk of common history, just like a couple of hours. And then the vast majority of stuff that was compulsory for me back at the time, mandatory, is now optional. You don't have to learn like the 20th century history anymore to go to the end of high school, which is mind-blowing to me. But you'll remember that as you develop what you're interested in and look at what you are interested in, as a student, you will also naturally go in, well, not naturally, you have to force yourself a little bit, but you'll go more towards learning that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I was interested in literature. I was reading, and like it's a
Yep.
bit of a chicken and egg thing as to like I was reading because I was interested in literature, or I just liked reading. So I did more reading, and I did more
No, but
reading
this
of
is
the kind of stuff that I'm interested in after school.
see, I think this is a common thing. Like when I was younger, there was no internet. My parents are pretty strict on TV and computer games. So what did I do? We used to go to the library on a Saturday morning,
Yeah,
and I'd read, and I'd
yeah,
pick some books,
yeah,
and then I'd read for fun, for
yeah.
pleasure. And when
And
I say this,
my brothers and sisters do that with their kids. They go to the library to pick up books
yeah,
and
and
to
when I
hang out and to read.
yeah, and when I tell the people I teach, when I tell them this, they're like, "What? You read for fun?" Yes, of course, I still do. They're just like, "Wow."
We can
They
do a
don't.
quick counter to the question, which
Yeah.
is there is an inverse proportional. So the more time you spend, I'm not against video games at all, right? At all. You know that I
Yeah.
like video games,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the more time you spent on, let's say, Candy Crush, but as an example of the kind of phone games that you can just like
Mm-hmm.
play mindlessly for a while,
Mm-hmm.
Clash of Clans or other types of games like that, like
Mm-hmm.
there's one Subway Surfing or whatever it is, like that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
or Fortnite, similarly,
Yeah.
that won't you won't I forgot what I wanted to say. The more time you spend on that, the less you're expanding your kind of mind on different things. So you're going into very specialized knowledge, arguably to a skill level with Fortnite.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the mindless phone games, I don't think there's much skill. I mean, there's a little bit of thinking with
Mm-hmm.
puzzle games. There is some thinking, but there's not much in terms of reward, because the whole point is to get you to play more. Um, Whereas learning stuff that you're interested in
Mm.
through reading, but not only, you could watch videos on YouTube. If you're interested in physics, go watch physics videos, and you'll find speeches, you'll find demonstration, you'll find vulgarizations of stuff, of interesting videos about chemistry, physics, history, whatever you're interested in, and you can go and find it. But it does take a little bit of effort. So, and I don't know if I'm answering the question. I think so. There's one point that I wanted to say is that if you spend some time looking at what you're interested in, cultivate that interest, and make a bit of an effort towards that, then you will naturally keep developing that interest and keep learning, which entertains a practice for that field of knowledge.
Yeah.
So, which makes it in turn that you're less likely to forget a lot of the stuff. So you'll be more able to remember at least stuff from that field of knowledge.
Yeah.
Now, the brain works in such a way that anyway, you don't forget necessarily. It's somewhere, but you don't need it immediately. So if you don't need it immediately, it's not present. It's like that is, it's like having, I mean, it's a bad analogy because there's been some interesting articles about how the brain is not like a computer. It's not like a hard drive, really.
Yes.
But we use that as an analogy a lot. And I'm going to right now to say one way to say it is the brain is the organ that takes up the most energy and resources for us as human beings. And so the stuff that we don't need immediately, it's just like put away somewhere, in the same way that if you close a software or an application you don't need. If you get them all open at the same time, you just burn your memory. Now, I think it's not a good analogy because they're always on in the back of our heads. So if you have your interest in geography and you've learned geography, and somebody brings in conversation a country, and you will remember stuff that you know automatically, it'll just come back.
Yeah.
Not everything, because it's not completely 100%, it's not the same as going to look for something, but the brain association and the idea association that we have going on in our brains is phenomenal and amazing.
That's partly mentioned in Thinking Fast and Slow, and then in
which I have progressed on. I'm 2/3 through now.
And in some of the books I've read, the shallows.
Some new books. Sorry, yeah.
Oh, you have? So some of the books I've read, The Brain That Changes Itself, The Shallows.
I was wondering if The Shallows is worth reading. I
think it is.
I had it in hand and I hesitated because you told me about it, and I was like, there was like 2 other books on the shelf, one that was more about optimism and how optimism was going to change the world. I was like, maybe I should read something like that rather than Shallows is just going to be depressing, I feel.
It's pretty dark. And I was going to make a point about that book in a second, but that book, Rest, The Shallows, The Brain That Changes Itself, they say very similar things. I'm noticing how they all link together. Neurons that fire together wire together.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about geography, the part of your brain that has all that geography stuff is going to keep firing, keep being enriched, and then you'll remember it more. And then the other point I wanted to make related to some of what you're saying about as you get into something is sometimes you have this idea that you're supposed to follow your passion, right, which I find a bit irritating because
I do.
How do you know what you're passionate about and how you're supposed to follow it? Well, what I think is try and do lots of things and experiment, and that's how you find and you follow a path along that way.
Yeah, it's a good point. I was really just thinking of subjects at school, and like if you're interested in related stuff, then just read some more about it.
Because people have to learn stuff at school, they never really get a chance to investigate or discover what they're really into. And then you get all this advice about follow your passion. It's just nonsense, in my opinion. Just like not very helpful.
No, most of the time it's not helpful because a lot of people don't necessarily have. Well, anyway, yeah, go ahead. You were going to say, and
then the second thing was about the shallows. The way we're taught at school has a big impact on what we remember. Now, in the shallows, it talks about how the learning things off by heart, by rote, isn't something you spend much time on in school anymore, because you can go find it on the internet. You don't need to remember a bunch of stuff because you can just go find it. So there's been this shift in pedagogy about giving people skills rather than giving people knowledge, and that's the more progressive way of thinking. And then you got this contrast, the so-called traditional, which is no, you need to learn stuff off by heart so you have a foundation on which to build and explore.
Go ahead.
So in the shallows, he talks about it and talks about it somewhere else. I can't remember where I read it, maybe even 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, that hundreds of years ago, when they used to have parliamentary debates a couple of hundred years ago, people would give speeches that were learned off by heart. They'll plan them and learn them and recite them off by heart, and that developed their thinking and their brains in a certain way. Now, people don't do that at school, and people don't do that on screen or in politics as much. Our skills have shifted, maybe even degraded. And what he's saying in the shallows is that we no longer think in depth anymore because of the internet. And I've been wondering about this and musing about it and thinking about it and wondering if the people I teach, because they're not having to push themselves to learn lots of stuff, does it mean they won't remember it or won't even try and remember it as they get older? Does that mean they won't, and referencing deep work, does that mean they won't even try and do things that are hard because they didn't do it when they were at school? I don't know. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, I don't know. It is a bit scary in some ways. I agree.
I think The Shallows is worth reading. And I remember learning my tables and having to make an effort and feeling really good when I got it. I have distinct memory of being about, I think I was 6. Yeah, I would have been 6 or 7, and learning my 6 times table off by heart and being really proud of myself. A bit like the same kind of, I completed I nearly downloaded Dead Cells for my phone, nearly, but I was a bit wary because I thought if I play this and I get into it, like Willem is saying, I won't do anything else.
It is a danger.
It's that same experience I had.
This is a good game, though.
It was that same experience I had when I first played computer games. Like, I completed it, and I think it was the same. I learned my 6 times table. I felt so good, and I don't think they get that in school much. That experience.
But you would know better than I do at the moment, at least.
I don't think I do. I do remember. This is so bad. I probably shouldn't say it, but I do remember teaching a guy when he was like 17, 18, A-level student, he didn't know his tables.
It happens. I mean, they say there's a huge disparity in knowledge school level from what I hear from parents and from what I hear in the news, at least. So I don't know how reliable that is. Because I'm not close enough to it, so I don't know what it means. But when I learned recently, like, yeah, history is now optional, I was like, what? Oh, okay.
But from your experience of teaching the master students, you've had a bit of a like. You mean
I don't know.
You don't know this?
So, but
you
no,
don't
but
know this?
How was so? I have a very hard time judging because it's the first time I'm teaching, and it's very particular circumstances. I have very little time with them. I'm teaching them for the most part something, so it depends. The second year students is generally new stuff, so I was expecting them to know anything about my subject. The fifth year students, I was more surprised. So, but I had no frame of reference to know what they knew before or not. So none of that was was surprise. And also they were taught and teaching in a foreign language for them.
Okay.
So any mistakes they were making was they had leeway to, I would tell them, and I would tell them, like, listen, you need to improve your English. Generally, it's pretty good, but it's also like, well, it's a foreign language for all of them. So it's a little bit more lenient on the quality of the language. I'm trying to think about what I would have judged them on. Spelling, grammar, for the most part, it's okay. But then again, as I said, it's like, it's a foreign language. So you're not judging the same way. So then again, I'm like, what's my frame of reference? I don't know what they're supposed to know and what level of English they're supposed to have as a foreign language. So my expectations are high, but I'm also lenient on exactly what I let go.
But I'm sure there was a moment where you were surprised that they didn't know how to do something. I remember you saying something.
Do you mean?
I think so. You might have said in a previous episode, like you were surprised that they didn't know.
I'm sure I have, but I don't know. But I don't know. They don't know anything. So it depends which students. So I had 3 classes. The second year students, I wasn't expecting them to know all that much about any of the topics that I was running.
Okay.
Oh, here's the thing that I said I was very surprised about. I think one of them, at least the one comes to mind, is not knowing how to do research on the internet.
Oh yeah. That was it.
And I was like, what do you mean, how do you do that? Just ask Google. Why are you asking me this question? And I was like, listen, guys, I understand that you don't know how to do this. I get it. It sucks. And it sucks to be locked down and everything else. But how the methodology, because I didn't have time for teaching. And that was like one of the things that they were asked. One example I'm thinking of. And this is not true for everybody. And it's difficult for me to gauge if that was just, because I just don't know. If this was ignorance on the part of a few people or one person, or it was, so like, as in complete, just something that was like off there, just they couldn't think about it. Or they didn't think about it at the time. So it just happens to be a one-time thing that you didn't realize, which is completely possible as well. Or some of them are just like, don't have that kind of knowledge that I thought was a given. There's also so much that I think is a given, but it's just my own perspective and it's not a given at all. It's just really difficult for me to gauge. It's the first time ever I was teaching. And as I said, I had very little encounters or interactions with other teachers at the beginning. I was just dropped in the middle of it. So, and there happened to be, maybe I would have learned, there was a day-long teacher training at the beginning, like in September, but I couldn't make it. So I don't know. Whether
that would have made a difference, who knows?
Who knows? Where it would have made a massive difference, possibly, is I would have might have met a bunch of other teachers that I could have talked to ask about their experience.
Yeah, built that kind of link, relationship, networking.
Because like last week, I was jury on a program where I'm coaching, but for the French students. And so I met another one of the coaches when we chatted a little bit, and she's been doing this a few years, and it would have been invaluable for me to have her contact in September to know how she's done it, what happens before. And of course, this is after the afterthought, and in hindsight's 2020, but I think it's completely, I was going to say insane. I don't know. Anyway,
Obvious, insane. Yeah.
Insane, ridiculous that we're not automatically put in touch with other coaches to say, here are all the other people. We don't have time to train you. You're professionals, but it might help to be in contact with the others who've done it before.
Yeah.
Because they'll know to tell you like what to do or not to do and what to avoid, what to focus on, etc.
That would have made a huge difference.
It would have made such a huge difference for me to have an idea of that. Now, it worked out. All the students, I'm very proud to say, they had fantastic grades at their oral presentation this week. I have like all the fourth year classes, I have the highest average. So that's not by much, but still. Well, let's say, okay, here's another way to pose that brag. It seemed like from afar, I didn't look at the grades for very long. One of the students shared it with me. All the other fourth year classes had at least one of the teams that was just not very good, would bring the average down. All my teams were high. Just there's nobody left behind, if you will.
Yeah, I get it. That's the challenge of teaching, to get everybody roughly on a level. They're going to be some who are really good and they're going to be some who are not great, but to have them all at they're all good to great.
Nobody was average.
That's good.
Now, what the other person that I talked to confirmed, which was very obvious for me, she confirmed that she could see she's a coach and also a member of a jury, which like I did now.
Yeah.
For this program where they're meant to be in agencies, like with working with a real client. So there were some things that I think we're getting a little bit further away from the question, but it's still interesting.
We are, but I'll bring you back. Don't worry.
Some things were completely ludicrous, like the grading grid that we were grading the students based on was completely different than what they were saying. I think I said that last week.
You did, yeah.
I did. Okay, so the other thing, and it was that she confirmed that they could see, and I might have said that last week. Now I'm repeating myself, but the average quality of all the students, it was immediately obvious how much extra time their coach had spent with them.
Yes, you did say, because you were like, you spent more time with them.
Mm-hmm. I spent a lot of time on it. Anyway, so I'm happy they got a result. I saw a couple of them. They're all starting their, well, the ones who found them, a bunch of them haven't found any internships. They're starting internships for like 3 months. But 2 of them are doing really good political-based internships, which is what they want to do, which is great for them. One of them is working with an MP and the other one in their communications team. And the other one's working
great.
For the greater city of Paris. So it's just, this is institutional. Which is cool. It's great that they're getting what they wanted. They wanted to have some kind of political experience.
Yeah. And don't underestimate how much of a difference you made.
I have no idea, but I think. Well, they're telling me a lot.
I'm telling you from experience. You will never know the ripples. You know, like you just won't, and it will come back in really interesting ways. Like the example I tell my current students is that one of the young teachers at my school has been out in a pub before lockdown. I think I told you this. And
I think so.
People he's bumped into have found out he teaches at my school and then asked, oh, is Mr. D'Souza still there? And then they've told him specific things that I told them when they were like 15 that they still remember. And they still like, it really made a difference.
Are you saying that one of the other answers to the question is listen to your teachers?
It could be.
Because you might still remember some of the stuff you're studying when you're 15.
Well, I think it's both ways for teachers and for students.
There's a broad one, which is listening, because we don't listen, which is a whole big topic.
Yeah. I was going to get into what are some more of the specific strategies that you think, and I think that younger people could use to remember things, and listening is definitely one of them.
Oh, practicing memory and memory stuff is super interesting too.
And that's the other thing.
Have you ever done the exercises of the memory palace and things like that? I've never really done it.
Well, there is, funnily enough.
I still wrote down the exercise from Deep Work about the cards and memorizing the deck of cards, which I haven't really done yet.
I haven't tried that, but in the psychology syllabus, there is a section about memory,
Mm.
about how memory works, and method of loci is the memory palace thing. And I
Okay.
don't teach that part of the syllabus. But from deep work, what I did start to do was, on my drive into work, pick something I was working on, something at school I was dealing with, and think about it. And I would drift off and come back and drift off and come back. And now I do a daily walk and I'll pick some problem, think about it, and then go off and come back and go off and come back. I used to get really annoyed that I didn't focus on it, but I've become less worried about that. And I've come to trust that all the tangents and the obliqueness leads to something. And pretty much I come back from my walk with an idea or some insight or some thought that I want to investigate further. And I think there's two sides to, yes, being able to focus really hard and remember stuff, but I think there's real power in the tangents, because it, and trusting that it all relates. And that's something I've come to do.
Is an important one to remember for, or is an interesting way to answer the question at the very least. Direction, because it's something that you practice. I think there is some natural ability to remember, but most of it I think is practiced, or at least a lot of it. I'm not entirely certain.
Well, I didn't realize, but I read fast. I didn't know that. I don't know.
I used to read fast. I don't read super fast at all. Depends what I'm reading. If I read an easy novel, I read it very fast.
Yeah.
Because I have a lot of experience with that too. If I read a complex book, the thinking fast and slow is okay, but I don't read it very fast.
But that's a
also because I don't read
deep book.
And then you go into philosophy, which you don't read fast at all. Some philosophers, French and German philosophers in particular, that are just very dense to understand. You just like read the same page.
I can't say
several
I've tried.
times. I tried a little bit, and then I don't know. I haven't really studied enough. They can be quite obscure.
I was reading something over Davina's shoulder on her phone, and I was like, "Oh, blah 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 blah." She was like, "How? What? Why? How do you read so fast?" And I was thinking, "I just read. And my sister."
Have you ever counted what your read like words per minute?
No.
You can do tests online to find out.
Yeah, I haven't actually, but I know it's pretty fast, and I think it's faster than the average. But again, it does depend what I'm reading.
Let's do it and find out how much we read.
I'm tempted to not right now, but yeah.
No, for next week. For next week.
Yeah, but I think practicing memory is a great way of enhancing your learning.
Yeah,
I think.
And practicing memory. So there's the whole memory palace exercise. Learning the deck of cards, which you create associations. That's part of the exercise, I believe. You create an association for each one of the cards in the 52 deck of cards, meaning that one card is like, so I think, well, here's the exercise as I remember it. Visualize your house or somewhere that's got meaning that you will always remember. And then as you visualize, each room of your house is a suit.
Oh yeah.
So one card is one room is heart, one room is diamonds, one room is the other ones I can't remember. And then you visualize objects and stuff you have in your house, and each one becomes a card.
Yeah.
So that you associate the experience of walking in your home or your room or your apartment, whatever, somewhere physical, with each one of the cards. And so there's a lot of different exercises, other exercises that I'm sure I don't know, but you can find online. And some of them is just, as we said, which is just learning to remember which is something I've not been doing in ages. It was interesting to work on my niece and like to remember a piece of poetry. I've not tried to remember anything by heart in a long time. And the few things I remember are like, well, passwords. 4-digit codes for my credit card. Like, what else do you need to remember these days? Right?
Well, so this is a good one, because I think I play guitar, and there are things I learn off by heart. So there are solos of particular songs that I will spend time learning and relearning and trying to figure out, and then I learn it off by heart. But the other thing, I did actually recite a poem for a colleague's leaving do years ago. I recited the poem "If," as part of his leaving do. And I remember like going over it, learning it, relearning it. And I can't remember it, but I don't think it would, like right now, but I don't think it would take me long to review it and get it back to how it was. And I find the same thing with guitar. Like playing guitar, I'm like, there was one solo I'd learned and I tried it yesterday. And I was like, oh, that's a bit wobbly. But once I'd done it once through, it all came back. But
actually, it's worth remembering that we're talking about reading and knowledge a lot, but it doesn't necessarily have to be through visual or reading only. So music is as much hearing as it is, well, in the case of guitar, finger practice. So there's muscle memory that it gets in place as well, along with the knowledge. And I was thinking other areas similar are interesting to learn are cooking recipes and flavors. Because I don't necessarily like, so I'm not a good, I'm a good cook. But I'm not a very, like
instinctive?
I'm more instinctive and intuitive than anything else.
Okay.
Because that's the way I learned. I know flavors through experience. I know to put stuff together and cut them up and just like throw them in a pan and it'll taste good. Now, I also can check a recipe and check for proportions and have an idea of it, and it won't be perfect, but that it just only takes a minute, and well, not just 1 minute, but I'll just check a few things, and it's useful because it does change a lot of stuff in the flavor. So cooking is an interesting one as well. Playing music is an interesting one as well to practice memory and practice skills, and also it's worth trying stuff. And another one I'm thinking, because the friends that are coming over for lunch together are the group of friends that I play board games with, and you guys know that I know that. Teaching board games is a whole thing. There are videos about it online. Because to have a lot of different board games, you need to learn the rules and learn them in a way that you can teach others, because nobody wants to read the rules. And there's nothing more boring than like getting to open the game and nobody knows how to play it. And depending on who's around the table, people have more or less of a threshold or a willingness to be bored or to get along with it. So because it gets clunky when nobody knows the rules very clearly, you don't have somebody leading how it works, and so some people hate it, and just like after a few minutes they're like, I just don't like this experience at all. I don't mind. I'm happy to experiment and to learn as I go. But some people don't like it, and it's way smoother if you have somebody leading who knows all the rules and knows how to share the experience without reading didactically. Is like, let's pull out all the pieces. This is what you do. This is what you do. And then little by little, we get it. So that you don't have to think about how the game works at the same time as what you're doing. If somebody else tells you how the game works, then you're like, okay, that part is managed by my friend. I don't have to take care of it. And then you might not understand how the game works at the beginning, but then you're in the same boat as a few other people around the table. And as you go, you start getting it through practice. And it's as much a cognitive brain, visual and tactile, because there's like game pieces and stuff that you're moving around. So there's all that to give a few examples of learning by heart doesn't necessarily mean learning a poetry, even though there is a lot of value there. Of course, poetry, performance, theater, there's a whole other area there that you can learn stuff. So, which is part of the wider answer of, if you want to remember more stuff, practice your memory. And if you try more things, like we're talking, like all the different examples I just gave, then you're also more likely to find things that you're interested in, which gets you closer to the idea of follow your passion, because then you're like, well, at least you have, hobbies or interests. I think the follow your path, and there's a little bit too much, as you said, too much emphasis towards it, but if you try a few things and you're like, oh yeah, I'm interested in this, I definitely want to practice more of this, cooking, guitar, whatever.
There's I think a wider point of what we're saying is that we underestimate the wider benefits of doing things that are not directly related to conventional learning. So playing guitar can enhance so many things. Cooking, being in the kitchen, can enhance so many things that are applicable to writing a proposal or coming up with ideas for a marketing campaign or like whatever it is. I did read
DIY,
in Brain,
gardening, plants.
I did read in Brain Rules that by John Medina that and I've said that, I'm sure I said this before, one of the things that makes people happy is having friends, or one of the biggest things that makes people happy is being friends. And maintaining friendships, one of the big things is understanding non-verbal communication, and then the nuance of things. And for some reason, learning a musical instrument enhances that, but they don't know why. So it's so interesting here you talk about cooking, because I never thought of that. Of course it does. Cooking enhances so many things. And
you learn recipes as well. I mean, you can double check recipes. There's so much online now. Everything's online. That's what I do. I check out a couple of YouTube videos and a couple of recipes. But it's
I just want to actually add another thing here. So my wife is like you. She's become instinctive and amazing with what she cooks. Just like
she bakes a lot, right?
And she bakes a lot.
Because baking is like there's a lot less room for error in baking than there is in throwing stuff in a pan, savory style.
Yeah.
And
so
baking
I think
and pastry, that takes a lot of rigor.
It does, and she's become very, very, very good at baking. But it's enhanced her cooking otherwise. But there's two interesting points I want to make. First interesting point is I've heard her talking with friends about baking, and then the level at which she's able to talk, like she'll say things like, "Oh no, if you need to leave it out and get to room temperature, because then that means you can do this, which means blah 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 blah." And there's that's a high level of stuff, and she's able to articulate it really well, a bit like teaching. So she could quite easily do a video thing on how to bake, easily. But the second interesting point is she never went to uni, and her perception of her intellectual ability, she's like, I'm not smart like you. I'm like, what are you talking about? Just because you didn't go to uni doesn't mean you're not smart. But I think a lot of people have that misconception that, oh, I never went to uni. Oh, I'm not very good at school. And then they immediately think they're not smart. Not true. There's loads of things that I'm sure people do that you use your brain in creative, interesting ways that show that you're really smart. You're on the ball with things. And I think schools can sometimes make people feel that they're not very smart, which is ridiculous.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of the structure is made for that. I don't know what the right answer to that is, for the answer to, I don't know, stress about grades, about competition, about exams, about ranking, about, plus there's multiple different things that the tween and teen age that also there's also ranking, but there's also being part of the group or the in or the out group, and all that stuff is melded into that.
And schools make that worse.
Puberty makes it complicated. Of course, we're talking about memory and learning. I've been thinking about Inside Out a lot. And the whole, we're going to, the Pixar movie.
Yeah, but in what way?
Well, I'll spoil it, so I apologize, but you should have seen it by now. So stop listening if you don't want the spoilers. But of course, the perspective of how memory is shown, and you have these big rooms where you have the guys hanging around. It's the long-term storage.
Yeah.
Also, so everything's there. It's just not really used, even to the point where you have some people who are like, well, wait a minute, do we need this stuff or not? Yeah. Are we getting rid of it? Does it go into the pile over there where it has very little chance of ever being recovered? So it does feel like that. But then there's also a lot of stuff that stays in long-term storage until it's been reused. And so this is where it comes on the everything that we're talking about around practicing memory, practicing things that you're interested in, is for the stuff that you're interested in to have a chance to be kept in the long-term storage. Because if it is related to areas that are of interest to you, your brain is going to keep them there, even though you don't remember everything all the time.
So there's two bits there. There's practicing the memory and finding strategies for practicing remembering. Means you can enhance what's in the long-term storage through what you're interested in. But then also by practicing things you're interested in, you're also enhancing your skills, applicable skills in any number of areas. And
the fascination stuff with school is on the spot. It seems like what you're learning is not useful for life.
Yep.
Why am I learning this stuff? Like, I'm never going to use it in my life.
Very surface level thinking.
It is, because the truth is you have no idea.
Mm.
And I thought like that too when I was a teenager, but the blessing and incongruousness or whatever, just and of being a teenager and a young person is how much you think you know everything, and you're absolutely certain that you know better than the old people who have been just sorting it out for a while. And at the same time, you know nothing, which is fascinating with how much cockiness and confidence you can have. And I had myself. And now I look back at young people, I'm like, you know nothing. And of course, it's not true. They know whatever they know. But what is also not true is that they believe they know everything and they know better, but they don't. They just don't. And younger people in high school is also interesting because you do not know when whatever you're learning might come in handy in your life. You have no idea. Yeah. And the likelihood of it, if ever you'll need it one day in your life, is probably the moment also that you won't remember it because and so it's also not worth stressing out in your life about trying to remember all the things that you're learning in high school just in case you remember them, because that's not how life works or the brain works either.
Yeah, completely inefficient way of using the brain. Our brains aren't designed like that. Try to remember everything, take it all in.
I mean, the day you're like, oh, well, that somebody important in a meeting is asking me about, I don't know, vectors in math. And I'm like, shit, I learned that. I have the answer somewhere. I can't remember. I'm going to look bad. Now, altogether, I don't think, that'll happen. And go figure, maybe I'll remember vectors. I remember the idea. I was thinking of a theorem. I don't know. I'm not Pythagoras. I'm not great at math. But I can also say, hey, I'm not that great at math. I don't remember that from school. Tell me about it. Let's look online.
That willingness to explore and learn rather than close it off, I think maybe that's what school does. Maybe it opens that willingness to explore.
It does in the best of circumstances, but it also does the exact opposite.
Absolutely.
Because it is also where the interest that you have in everything as a kid is just beat down into submission and destroyed.
Well, it's worse because it's a systematic progression of destruction of your willingness to explore until you become a docile
sheep,
a cog in a machine.
Yes.
Relentlessly.
Yes. So that then you can just be a dude on a bike for Deliveroo or a manager in an office shifting emails. From
we really sound like Gen Xers. Oh wait, we are.
We do, and we are. Wait, why? Because your students aspire to be middle management?
Well, it's just from what you said about the muck job and being a delivery driver. And I remember it from the book Generation X. Although I was massively offended this week when a pupil called me a boomer.
You're offended?
Yes.
Wait, did you get an okay boomer?
Yes. I was so annoyed about it. I was like, I think I went on a rant.
That's just what annoyed you, is just he said you're old.
No, I don't mind being called old. I fully accept that I'm middle-aged.
If you're saying okay boomer, if somebody says okay boomer to you, it means that you've just been old and out of touch.
I don't mind being old. I don't mind being out of touch, but I'm not a boomer.
Why not?
Because boomers have all the resources and the money and messed up the world, and the millennials are moaning about it, and Gen X is the ones in the middle going, like, the dude abides. That's,
Okay.
Do you agree, disagree, don't care?
The dude abides.
Yes. And I don't think, will anybody watching get that reference? Probably not.
You should. And if you haven't seen The Big Lebowski, I'll give you the reference so that you should go watch The Big Lebowski.
Although I do get surprised by how many of my odd references my pupils get. I throw in something and they're like, oh yeah, they get it.
Well, they have parents our age, don't they?
Yes.
Ish.
Yes. But even then, I'm shocked. I get really surprised.
Like Morgan's been, so my brother's been showing 80s movies to my nieces. We watched Die Hard at Christmas together.
Rated 18 film. How old are your nieces?
I don't think it's rated 18, is it?
It
No.
is. It is rated 18.
In the UK.
True. In the UK.
No, there's no way it's rated 18. It must be
It
rated
is.
teen.
No, I'm serious. It's rated 18.
Anyway,
Are you going to check it now?
it doesn't matter. They've seen it.
It is a great film. It's a great film.
There was a little bit of tense moments for the little one, but it's a great film.
It is.
So they've seen the Goonies. They've seen like tons of 80s and 90s.
Well, we just watched.
References.
We just watched last night Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and I haven't seen Bill and Ted Face the Music. I know you haven't seen it. I think it's ridiculous that you haven't seen it because.
But you managed to watch the whole thing?
Yes, because I think it's great.
I don't know. Maybe I should try again. I was in a weird mood the last 2 nights. I just ended up, I was like, I don't know what to watch. One of those, I'm flicking through stuff on Netflix and Amazon. I'm like, there's so much choice and I don't want to watch anything.
It's too much choice. Go and watch Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
I'll try again.
It is stupid, but I think it's great. Just for the 2 fundamental laws, which I think we should end with: be excellent to each other and party on, dudes.
Which is also what I've been reading. Preacher, the comic. That one's rated 18. Oh my god, that is so violent.
It's so good though.
It's really good. I finished the first volume, first book.
Utterly,
it's really good.
Blasphemous, ridiculous. Just it's
hardcore, but it's really good. And so there's
very twisted idea.
Very twisted ideas. There's a
Watch
whole
it
thing
on
about
Amazon.
Be one of the good guys. I heard of the TV show was really good.
It is.
I had started it a while back. I think I watched 1 or 2 episodes, and then I can't remember why I didn't watch the rest.
They mishmash the kind of.
I talked about it with somebody who knows all of that, and then I just decided I was more into reading, and I was like, I'm going to read the source material. And I heard that the TV show was really good, but it's also very different. They just adapted it in a very different way.
They did. They bring in bits from one book into another and mix it around a bit. I've got book 4 for Christmas and I haven't finished it yet. I haven't read it yet. I started
reading Doom Patrol, which is just weird. I don't know if I like it or not. I can't figure it out.
Good.
It's a bit more, even though weird, it's a bit more superhero-y because it's kind of, that's the thing, but it's also very strange, super weird.
Did you like Ren and Stimpy when you were young?
No, I didn't know what that is. What is that? Oh, wait, I know what that is. It's a cartoon.
Yeah.
Remind me which one it is.
It's the one with a cat with a blue nose.
Yes.
And then a chihuahua. And it's utterly
completely
off the
nuts.
wall.
Yeah,
one of my favorite things. So there was, for some reason, it might have been provoked by watching Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. There was a cartoon, The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse, the late 80s.
Yeah, I remember that.
87, with very distinctive theme tune, very distinctive kind of way of doing things. And I ended up reading all about it on Wikipedia, as you do when you're learning and exploring. And I didn't realize it was so influential. I remember absolutely loving it when I was like 10, 11, but it was so odd. It was so odd. It was really, really like messy, weird, twisted things in it. And loads of people who worked on that went on to do things like Wall-E, Ralph Breaks the Internet, and also Ren and Stimpy. And I realized all that weird stuff is now like 30 years old, and of course gives rise to Rick and Morty. So, because we are that age of producing things like Rick and Morty and for the new generation. But going back and watching that New Adventures of Mighty Mouse, just very odd.
Yeah. Okay.
Really, really worth going back to rewatch.
Okay.
So to come back to the question, explore lots, allow yourself to learn lots, practice memory stuff, read. We always say that. Read books.
We always say that. I mean, you know that the reference is going to be that.
Yeah. And don't underestimate how much you learn from doing other stuff like playing musical instruments, cooking, walking. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's our answer.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.